local people, important issues. CBS 10 WILM's weekly focus on the Lower Cape Fear region. This is Byline Wilmington with your host, Don Ansell.
Welcome. Well, this morning you're going to meet Alfred Schnag, who escaped the Holocaust just as the Nazis began herding Jews into concentration camps for eventual extermination. Alfred was from a Jewish family in Germany and narrowly escaped the Nazi death camps. He was 7 years old at the time. Alfred, it's first of all a great pleasure to meet you. I've been reading about you for years. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank
bringing
you.
Your lovely wife Anita to the show.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk with you and to get to know you.
So you were 7 years old. How vivid are the memories of that period in your life?
Well, there's certain events in that period of my life that are extremely vivid. I recollect them, and you can't forget those events.
What years are we talking about?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about that. I was born in 1931. Hitler came into power in 1933 when I was 2 years old. I started school in Germany in a Jewish school because we were not allowed to attend.
So the schools were segregated?
Schools. They were. The Jews had been forbidden to participate in public education.
This
with
was
the
in
Germans.
Cologne?
I lived in Cologne. My family lived in Cologne. Let me tell you about my family. They consisted of myself, my twin brother Norbert, and my parents. And we lived in Cologne. My father was employed there, and when Hitler came into power, I was 2 years old. 2 years after he came into power, they promulgated the Nuremberg laws. I don't know whether you're familiar with those.
Well, for our viewers,
are.
quickly, because I've got a lot of
Right.
ground to cover. Tell us what those were.
Those laws essentially made anti-Semitism state policy. They declared that all Jews, and they defined what a Jew was, were no longer citizens, not allowed to have the rights of citizenship. We couldn't depend on the court system. We couldn't vote. We were just ostracized.
Now, how did you, these are not the memories of a 7-year-old child. These are, so did you sense a change in your environment?
Personally, no, of course not.
You didn't sense anything?
We depended on our parents
Right.
for our security and everything that we did. And we lived fairly normal lives as we would have had we grown up anywhere.
Did your parents tell you what was going on?
Yes.
They did.
They never kept any secrets, and they certainly had their opinions of Adolf Hitler and
shared them.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. We actually made fun of this ridiculous leadership, this dictatorship. And
were they frightened in the beginning?
I can't tell you whether they were frightened. They certainly were concerned about what was happening in Germany.
How large a Jewish population was there in your environment there?
Well, Germany had a population at that time, Jewish population, of about 500 to 550,000 Jews. And in Cologne, there was a reasonably sizable Jewish population. The Jews were pretty well scattered throughout Germany. But my family had lived in the Rhineland or surrounding Cologne for centuries. We've traced my family back into the 1700s. That's as far back as we've been able to go. And they were culturally part of the German society. They fully assimilated. And
What kind of work did your father do?
my father was employed with an international trading company, and they dealt in metals and ores, and some of which were strategic materials that were needed for the German industry.
Was that his business, or he worked for someone?
He worked for a Jewish company that was actually was an international trading company that had offices in Holland, that had offices in England, and even in the United States. And that became very important later on in our lives. And he was a trader for that company. And
November 7th, 1938. I don't know if our viewers know the importance of that date. It was a very significant date in this whole process of what played out. Will you tell the viewers what that date was, what happened,
Sure.
and your memories?
Actually, I think it was November 8th, that the important date. And we had
Kristallnacht?
Kristallnacht.
Kristallnacht.
Kristallnacht. That
Or
was on
the
November
Night of
9th.
Broken Glass.
That's right. Well, let me tell you about it. We,
Do you remember it, first of all?
I vividly,
Vivid.
very, very
Okay.
important in my
Go ahead.
recollection. My father knew that we had to get out of Germany because he knew there was no future. The Germans had taken over his company. They had insisted that the Jewish traders who were working there remain with them and teach them how to conduct that business because they needed these materials for their armaments industry. And my father was able to find a position with his company in Holland. So they had packed up their furniture, had found a place to live in Amsterdam, and we had made plans to move. And on November 8th,
1938.
my family, because everything had been moved out, we moved into the Dome Hotel in Cologne. Now, the Dome Hotel is situated right next to the Dome Cathedral, a large cathedral in the center of Cologne. It's also near the railroad station where we were to depart the following day to leave for Holland. And so we moved into the hotel and we were going to spend the night there. My brother and I anticipated going to Holland the next day. It was all very exciting for the two of us. We went to bed that night in the hotel, and in the middle of the night, my parents came into our room and said, "Boys, wake up and come over here." And they pointed us to the opening in the drapes that covered the windows
Right.
of the hotel. And from the window of the hotel, you could see the shopping street, high-end shopping street in Cologne, just below our window. I think we were on the second floor of the hotel. And we stood there, the two of us, and we looked down. And what we saw was the most amazing sight that I've ever seen in my life. Horrendous sight.
We're going to talk about exactly what you saw when we come back. We're remembering the Holocaust. Stay with us.